Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering. Here we have Jeffrey on a painter deck versus me on camera with Cephalid Breakfast. Don't often get to play in these. Had a few small events lately. We got like 7 or 9 people. Sometimes I'll hop in to get rid of the buy as long as I don't have too much pressing work. And here I actually get to play Jeffrey Woods. I was glad he's actually in from the West Coast. Really cool to meet somebody new who has a love for Legacy, had all sorts of different brews that he could have played. He chose to play Painter, and we've got Goblin Welder on board, which is going to make Counter Magic very, very suboptimal, and Painter Servant already there. Aether Vial can act as acceleration and potentially be useful with Thassa's Oracle. We got a Force of Will on Grindstone. I mean, one more mana and it is just over. And really, just with what's on board, this is a disaster. Oh, interesting. So exchanging for red element for Lotus Petal and then rebbing the Force. I don't actually like that. So basically, Jeffrey's just down a red blast for no strong reason. The Goblin Welder activation didn't really accrue any type of advantage, and if he wanted a Grindstone in play, he could have allowed the Grindstone to be countered and then welded in the the Grindstone for the Painter Servant, and he still would have had that red blast in hand. So I'm not liking this line. I know he doesn't have red mana available right now, but it could certainly become available later. Something to consider, just how good Goblin Welder is versus counter magic in general. Bit of an argument for Force of Negation, that it does at least exile the card. Force of Will, on the other hand, is just going to counter it, goes to the graveyard, and that Goblin Welder is going to make a mockery of your attempts to counter their artifacts, especially that they can run artifact lands and so many cheap artifacts. Any of them can be converted to an artifact that's already in the graveyard. Vial could create a really interesting situation here. The tension between these two decks is, I think, fascinating. Grindstone is looking to mill out Cephalid Breakfast, but that's Cephalid Breakfast's main plan, is to mill itself out. So it's a question of how this is going to get sorted out, on whose terms are cards going to be going into the graveyard. Getting Thassa's Oracle in hand can be very strong. Aether Vial can potentially put that into the battlefield. So it's going to be a little bit of a who flinches first situation. Now, Jeffrey only one artifact on board. He draws like an Ancient Tomb, though. It is over, because it's important to note that when Grindstone resolves, it's going to check and see the Painter in play or not. Not precisely how it works, but when Grindstone's ability resolves, if Painter's in play, then the ability will still be lethal even if Grindstone is not in play. So you can activate Grindstone, weld it out for Painter Servant, and that's a wrap. So Jeffrey literally just needs 1 mana. I did a couple of ponders on my turn, and it was just kind of a risk analysis situation. I believe I currently have a situation where I can win the game. If he tries to grind me out, draws mana, then I can vial in Thassa's Oracle. I'm stepping through right now the new Wizard Cycling card. So this is a tense high wire act here. Thassa's Oracle in hand. Now, because Shuko is sorcery speed, I can't just win. Shuko will equip to Cephalid, repeatedly putting cards into the graveyard. At some point, another artifact will enter the battlefield, most likely an Aether Vial or Batterskull, and that can be swapped out for the Shuko, stopping the combo. So I won't actually be able to exile my entire library, as Welder is just so dangerous in this matchup. Now, he does have Ancient Tomb, so he could have completely milled me out. but that opposing Aether Vial just too much of a problem. Instead, he's actually going to use his Lotus Petal to get another Goblin on board, Goblin Engineer. Get a card into the bin. I think Jeffrey missing the complexity of the situation. That Goblin Welder was his one lifeline that was keeping him around. Now going to be able to just combo off since it's tapped. Otherwise, would have been able to weld out the Shuko and stop the combo. But as it is, this should be clear sailing from here with no more interaction on the other side. Going into the bin. Eventually hit Narcomoebas and Dread Return that Thassa's Oracle. He gets to take a look through the entire list. It's not a typical list. Apparently, people are winning with Cephalid Breakfast online now. Other people catching on to the power of the strategy, though I still, without having tested those Yorion builds, I still feel pretty strongly about this 60-card build. 4 Force, 3 days I think I'm on right now. 4 Brainder, 4 Pawn Storm. Ponder and Brainstorm. Re-recording these videos, unfortunately, lost the audio on the first ones by not being plugged in. Disappointing. 5-card hand here. Force, blue card, Stoneforge, and 2 lands. That'll have to do. It's got some versatility. Shuko going to the bottom. It can be fetched up with Stoneforge if that's the direction that the game's going to go. Oh, and Nomad's off the top. That is actually preferable. And a little bit of a decision here. Going to be a Ponder. And look at that. Finding a blue card and a step through. That is pretty ideal. Thassa's Oracle can go to hand. Be able to force a will any dangerous plays here, though it's not super effective with Welder out, as previously mentioned. And Welder actually just getting in some beats. Able to step through, find the Cephalid, and threaten lethal on the next turn with Nomads plus Cephalid. Deck can go for the throw out of nowhere. Very show and tell-esque feel to it. Your opponent has 3 mana. It could just be over at any time. Urza's Saga ticking up. Another Goblin Welder. This Saga is going to be able to convert into some type of useful artifact. Could be a Pithing Needle to stop half of the combo, either the Nomad or the Shuko. Unfortunately, for people playing against Cephalid Breakfast, Pithing Needle doesn't really get the job done. Pivot to the other part of the combo. Card like Humility or something, which is the tall order versus a deck trying to get such a inexpensive combo together. There's the Cephalid, there's the Nomad. And we've got a Monkey Blast. Simian Spirit Guide pitching to try and Pyroblast this Cephalid, but Force of Will protects it. And that is going to be a wrap. Just milling through. Going to need to be a card like Surgical Extraction or something. The Cabal Therapies have been sideboarded out. They're just going to shotgun this win, getting the Nomads, getting the Narcomoebas. And there's the Dread Return for the win. As Thassa's Oracle's ELD wins not just in Commander. This is a totally legit legacy deck.